Confirmation bias is the human tendency to place excessive weight on data that confirms our existing point of view and to dismiss information that contradicts it. And this can lead to all sorts of decision-making errors. I know because I've made them myself. A few years ago, I was convinced that business owners would want to come with me to Normandy on a business retreat. And so I hired a digital marketing firm whose owner believed in these kind of staff rides. I spent probably $50,000 on videos and sales funnels and Facebook ads, and not a single buyer. It was a big epic fail. And what I learned from that was I'd essentially been inhaling my own gas. I didn't have a good outside perspective to say, hey, Chris, make sure that the value to your ideal client is clear. Make sure that your language that you're using in your videos and on your emails makes the value obvious to your ideal clients. So even though we got 2 million views and 275,000 likes, they were all from people who weren't ideal clients. And so I learned that you've got to put measures in place, whether you're a CEO of a big business or you're a solo entrepreneur like me. You've got to put measures in place to address confirmation bias. So reducing confirmation bias, you need three elements. The first thing you need is internal viewpoint diversity. And what that means is you need people around you on your team who think differently, not just look differently, but who actually think differently because of their different cognitive skills, their different natural strengths, their different experiences. Second, you need bold external perspectives. So you need outside voices that will give you an external view of things to help you avoid blindsides. And finally, you need intense psychological confidence. So those people that you have around you have the confidence that they can disagree with you agreeably without fear of retribution. And so when you get all those three working together, you are going to have very sound decision making. Now, what happens when something is missing? If you have good internal viewpoint diversity and you also have bold external perspectives, but the people around you lack psychological confidence, then what you are going to have is an environment of fear where people are going to be unwilling to disagree with you. The recent challenges at Boeing are a classic example of people who know there's something wrong, who have tried to identify the problems to the management, but the management simply wasn't interested. They emphasized production schedules and cost efficiency at the expense of safety, and now there are all sorts of problems that Boeing's trying to dig themselves out of. If you're in intersection number two, where you have internal viewpoint diversity and intense psychological confidence, but you lack bold external perspective, then you are at high risk of inhaling your own gas, getting high on your own supply, so to speak, because you are not having somebody who's challenging those implicit biases that you have as an organization. And a great example of this is Blockbuster, where they didn't have the customers and they didn't have the external consultants who were telling them the marketplace is changing and people now want to emphasize convenience and on-demand services as opposed to having to go to a brick and mortar store and pick out some videos. So Blockbuster stuck with their business model and the rest is history. If you're in intersection number three, where you've got external perspective and psychological confidence, but you don't have internal viewpoint diversity, then what you get, of course, is groupthink. And a great example of this is Kodak, where their senior executives were all entrenched in the film photography business. And so when Kodak actually invented the digital photo, they decided that this is just going to be a niche market, not a big deal. Everybody wants to stick with film. They stuck with film and missed the leading edge of the digital photography boom. Now, worse things can happen if you are missing multiple of these. And a great example of this is Robert E. Lee at Gettysburg. The people around him had held Lee in such awe that nobody would question his decision, even something as mad as Pickett's charge. When you go with me to Gettysburg and you stare across a mile of open ground and you just say, this is absolute madness. How could anybody order this charge across this open ground in the face of cannon and rifle fire? And yet only one of his generals disagreed with his decision. And it was because everybody held Lee in such awe. They felt like he was infallible. And Lee didn't do anything to encourage people to disagree with his decision or to come up with alternative plans. So they lacked the psychological confidence, not because Lee was a browbeater, but because everybody held him in this awe. They were unwilling to disagree with him. You didn't have much internal viewpoint diversity within Lee's inner circle. Again, about the only one who maybe looked at things differently was Longstreet. Everybody else was pretty much cut from the same cloth. And Lee didn't benefit from any external perspective. So Jefferson Davis long since stopped questioning his decisions or engaging with him in strategic debate. He let Lee go off to invade the North for a second time. And of course, that became the turning point in the war and the high tide of the Confederacy. And 2 years later, the Civil War was over. So having all three in place and working together is vital. It helps you reduce confirmation bias, which then reduces the unforced errors in your decision making and positions you to be successful in your business.